All right, welcome again, everybody. Are you able to see my screen, my presentation?
Yes.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Julie Donna. I use she, her pronouns. I am a energy and climate justice organizer for KFTC, and myself and a wonderful team of the other organizers with our Kentuckians for Energy Democracy will be sharing this presentation with you tonight. And I think we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome to the webinar. This is called Stop the Shutoffs, a webinar about utility disconnections and House Bill 180. And so we'll be giving some information. You are free to pop in with questions in the chat, as well as we'll be going into breakout groups later on and having a call to action on how, after learning about the issue, we'll be going over what you can do about it. So happy that you all are here. Just an introduction to Kentuckians for Energy Democracy. Who are we and why are we putting on this webinar today? Well, Kentuckians for Energy Democracy is a network of organizations from all around Kentucky, working different areas geographically on different issues, but we've all come together to fight for energy democracy in Kentucky. So we are trying to get our energy regulators, our energy policymakers to do the right thing, demand a sustainable and clean energy system, and one that is making energy affordable, equitable, clean, and safe, and one that works for people and listens to what people want and need from our energy system. And as you can see, there's a whole lot of folks that are on board with this idea. Folks from energy, housing, all across different areas of work, and even a lot of folks on board that because this is something that we all need and is important to us every day. All right, so then what we are talking about is our direct experiences of Kentuckians who have been impacted by utility disconnections, and we'll be going over some recent data on what's happening with utility disconnections, really looking at why it really is a top issue in Kentucky. And then we'll be going over the House bill that we can have the opportunity to take action on right now.
House Bill 180, not 66.
Yes, that is a mistake on the slides. If y'all remember, if y'all had been engaged with us last year, we were campaigning on this issue last year, and it was House Bill 66. But now we have this opportunity again to take action with House Bill 180. And with that, I will turn it over to our one of our other presenters, I believe it was, yes, Chris, who can introduce himself and share our next portion.
Thanks, Julie. This is the perfect time to introduce me because I'm the one who did not catch the mistake and just fixed it on the Google slide doc. Thanks for catching that, Lane. Yeah, if somebody will bump us to the next slide, there we go. My name's Chris Woolery. I'm the Energy Projects Coordinator at Mountain Association. I'm a former Energy Star builder and energy services contractor. In my current work, I work with utilities to create energy efficiency retrofits that literally pay for themselves out of the savings right there on the bill. Oftentimes we do retrofits with no money down, and they always lower the bill, or we can't do the retrofit. So as a person who has gone in to homes across Eastern Kentucky, hundreds of homes across Eastern Kentucky, I've seen firsthand why high rates and utility disconnections are such a problem. First of all, they disproportionately impact our most vulnerable communities across Kentucky, folks of color, low-income communities, people who rely on medical devices, people who have medicine that must be refrigerated, or folks that are immigrants and don't know how to navigate the system, and people with young children. So that's one reason why disconnections are a problem. A second reason would be, yeah, oftentimes they are still happening, even here in Kentucky during extreme weather. So people are getting, there are no legal protections against disconnections in the heat, and the protections against cold weather are minimal. So that is dangerous, to make disconnections during heat, cold, or extreme weather. And then finally, we just want to lift up the fact that we're hearing and learning that the utilities companies are not much affected by disconnections and fees for reconnections, because it's really a drop in the bucket for them. But for the folks that are facing those fees and disconnections, it is truly a huge burden. And we can talk about some of the numbers of how we come to that conclusion a little bit later when Cam picks up his part of the presentation. So on the next slide, I just want to lift up what happens when people are in low income situations with high energy bills, especially if they're facing disconnections. I think we're a little behind on the slideshow. There we go. I hope y'all can see that. This data is a little old. I wasn't able to search for new data, but I think it's important and illustrative, and probably pretty close to today's data. And what happens, and again, I've talked to folks who've been through this and are doing this, and some people literally choose not to have electricity at all. That is a thing. And when KFTC went door knocking across Eastern Kentucky, they met some of those folks. But for others, they might choose to go without food for a day or longer. They might choose to go without their medicine, or their going to the hospital, their doctor or their dentist. Many folks chose not to fill their prescription, or chose to take less than they were prescribed, because they couldn't afford it. And then many folks have experienced sickness or ill effects from having to keep the house too cold. Folks that are facing disconnection and high electricity bills often heat to 50 or 55 degrees, because that's all they can afford. And so I call that survival mode. In the next slide, I want to talk briefly about a framework that says, hey, a utility shutoff is essentially a human rights violation in many cases. And I'm not saying every shutoff, but I'm saying if you're shutting folks off because of their inability to pay, it could fall into that category. Folks are foregoing critical services. We talked about impacts of extreme weather. They have to find other more hazardous ways of heating, cooling, or lighting. That could mean space heaters. That could mean faulty electrical issues. It could create fires. They might be doing kerosene, which creates bad indoor air quality. They might be running propane or a wood stove that they normally don't use, that might have some issues. And so really, shutoffs are putting folks at risk, and that includes folks with medical devices and life supporting systems as well. And so we wanted to lift up some quotes from outside of Kentucky as well. And we pulled a quote from NAACP's expose called Lights Out in the Cold: How to Reform Utility Shutoff Policies as If Human Rights Matter. And this quote from Bernard in Detroit said, hey, these companies are getting rich while we freeze to death. And that is literally what is happening. Again, we have some of the numbers for you later. And so I'm just going to lift up it looks like I'm going to, yeah, thanks. Bear with me if I'm dealing with a head cold, and I think I've got the next two slides. So I wanted to talk about a little bit about some direct service providers, some of which we know and love, like Hemp Hill Community Center. Hemp Hill is in Letcher County. They have solar on the roof because they couldn't afford their bills. And when the floods came in 22, I think it was, they served as a critical resilience hub, a distribution center for food, for water, for communications, for showers, and for everything. They literally had folks sitting outside at 24 hours, 7 days a week to guard the supplies that were coming in, to make sure that they could distribute them to the folks that need them. And Hemp Hill said, hey, we've been struggling to pay our bills, and rate increases may mean further cuts in our outreach efforts and programs. And so you can imagine what Disconnections do on top of that. And then one more quote from me before I turn it over to Corey. This one's from another direct service provider in Eastern Kentucky. They said, in the context of a rate case, as a mission, our funds are tight. Any increases in utilities have an extremely negative effect on our mission. Those funds could be used far more effectively in our feeding programs, adult care programs, home repair programs, and more. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all for your patience with me. I'm going to kick it over to Corey.
Thanks, Chris. So Chris gave some quotes that are great examples of folks who are serving their community and are pretty much being gouged by utility companies and aren't able to keep up services. But we also know that individuals, all of us here who pay a power bill, I'm sure, at least I can say I've faced a really high power bill that I was unsure how I was going to pay. And there are many folks who are getting shut off. And so this quote that's from a KPC customer or from a Kentucky Power customer out in Eastern Kentucky talks about getting shut off during the storm and only having one plug for a nebulizer. So like Chris said earlier, folks who have medical devices that need to be plugged in, if you get shut off, you can't use your medical device. And these folks, thank goodness we're able to get gifted a hotel. As the quote says, it would have frozen to death if family didn't give me a hotel until we could pay. And we've heard many stories like this. And on the next slide is another example of someone who's facing a super, super high power bill. And just like Chris said, is choosing to keep their house cooler, kind of to save money and try to keep the lights on. So we know that there are so many folks who not only are facing disconnection, but every single month, every day, they are calculating to figure out how they can avoid disconnection, how they can make sure that they do pay their bill so they do keep their power on. And in doing that, they can put their self and their family at risk, as well as their home in terms of using, riskier heating and cooling sources. This is another example right from someone in the Kentucky Power territory about a neighbor who had no AC this summer and won't have heat this winter as she can't pay her bill. So folks are making these decisions all the time to try to avoid disconnection. And then unfortunately, too many, thousands and thousands of Kentuckians are faced with that disconnection and then are faced with possibly reconnection fees and late fees when they try to get that turned back on. So many folks here on this call actually made a comment in the recent rate hike proposal by Kentucky Power out in Eastern Kentucky. So a few of those folks are here tonight, and one of them, we're going to watch a video of her. So it's funny to have her here and to be watching a video of her, Bryn Martin, who shared some of her thoughts with the Public Service Commission about the rate hike and really goes to how serious of an issue this is and how the issue of shutting someone's power off truly is life or death.
I'm not sure you all will be able to hear it. But we can try.
If you have any problems, Julie, I can grab it on my end and share the audio.
Okay. That might be the best thing.
Sure.
Or
Hang on
oh
one
wait,
second, I'll
actually,
look.
yeah, let's try that.
Thanks for bearing with us, y'all. And Bryn is here. Maybe she'll just give us a rendition of her whole comment. I'm just kidding. It was a lengthy, a good comment. I'm sure she doesn't do it all again. And I also just wanted to add that, so the few quotes that I shared are truly a drop in the bucket of the hundreds and hundreds of pages of comments that you can read from folks that just in the past few months who have sent comments about the Kentucky Power rate increase, proposed rate increase. There are so many stories just like those quotes of folks who are, have went without heat for years, waiting to save up money for their HVAC, or are trying to figure out how they're going to buy clothes for their kids and food and medicine and pay a higher bill. So truly, like I said, just a drop in the bucket. There are so many folks who are facing this same thing.
Hi, it's now a good time to jump in.
Let's play your video and then I'll pass it over to you if you want to add any comments. Does that work?
Okay, great. All right, go ahead. Thank you.
I think Eric's got it.
We're not even talking about being able to afford the caviar and the big yachts that they can afford. We're not even talking about that. We're talking heat. Electricity. We need that, and we need it safely. I was playing a game with some of my colleagues, and one of the questions was, who dies the most? Do people die most from heat? Or do they die from the cold? Isn't that a terrible thing to even have to wonder? Now, you have a lot of senior citizens and families who might have to answer that question with their lives and find out statistically it's the cold. So many people die from the cold. Only this is not a game. The stakes are high. The lives at risk are real. And we shouldn't put people through that just so somebody else can make some more millions. I mean, really. It's not fair to you. It's not fair to us.
Absolutely. Fact.
Thanks. Yeah, we can all come off mute and give some snaps and some claps to Bryn because she is here. So we can give her flowers right here, right now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great job. Great job.
Thank you.
Bryn, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's real. We have a couple million people, dying regularly from heat. When you look at stats over recent years, in fact, and it is serious. And as Corey pointed out in some of the education webinars she did for KFTC, when we were first learning more about this, that some of the leaders of the company and CEOs were getting multiple millions, maybe 12 to 14 million. While people are like he pointed out earlier, trying to decide between getting prescriptions refilled and getting food. We have so much poverty and food insecurity. I'm also with Poor People's Campaign, and they shared information showing that it has been reported that poverty is one of the top 4 leading causes of death in this country. We're not even talking about when you look at the world and people dying from poverty. So this is real. So I also put in the link some assistance where people can get help with that. There's also an average monthly plan that's available for people so that their bill is the same in the heat or in the cold. So if you have an extreme cold or cold winter, you can pay the same throughout the year. You don't get hit with something big that you can't afford and get the disconnect fee, warnings, and then the reconnect fees and all of that. So that could be helpful for some people. So that link is also in the chat, as well as some help. And I also want to point out that March 2nd, we're having a rally with the Poor People Campaign, and KFTC and other organizations and clergy will be a part of it. We encourage you to be a part of it, where we can speak up against poverty and for higher wages so that people can afford, the heat and the and affordable housing and healthcare and so many of the other important, vital issues that we need to survive and to look out for one another and in our Commonwealth. So please join us. I'll put that information in the link in the chat as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brent. We're going to be inviting y'all to a lot of great stuff tonight, so keep your eye on the chat for links to sign up. And I also wanted to shout out Suzanne, in case you haven't read the chat. Suzanne Griffith, who is here tonight, gave a fantastic public comment at this same meeting. Totally worth watching the whole video just to see these two ladies' awesome comments, as well as she wrote some great op-eds. So appreciate all of the people here who are participants on this webinar, but are truly organizers and powerhouses in this space. And we thank you. So, great. I'm going to go over to the next slide, and we're going to talk about some of the racial justice impacts of this issue, because we know, in Kentucky, in the South, everywhere in the US, we know that we're all in the same water, but we're kind of in different boats, right? And folks are affected by things differently. And so while so many families are facing disconnection, we know that the rate is actually much higher for households of color. So in 2022, 1 in 5 households struggled to pay for an energy bill, and that rate was 50% higher for households of color. And there's been more research on this over the past several years. You can go to the next slide, Eric. From a bunch of different sources, the NAACP, the American Housing Survey, Indiana University surveys that talk about how non-white households, Black households, Indigenous people of color households are more likely to be disconnected. And so there's that last quote there is a really jarring number of low-income Black, Hispanic, and other non-white households were disconnected at a rate of at least 3 times more than low-income white households. So we know that this issue isn't just about, it isn't just about energy justice. It isn't just about housing. It isn't just about utility bills. It's also a racial justice issue. Go to the next slide. I'm going to pass it over now, unless folks have questions for me.
All righty. Well, thank you, Corey. So Chris kind of touched on, bigger picture stuff as well as Corey, talking about, the entire country's landscape, but I was going to focus in a little bit more on Kentucky. As far as major utility companies with Disconnections, 3 that operate in Kentucky that were in the top 86% of shutoffs in the past 3 years. PPL, which owns Kentucky Utilities and LG&E, American Electric Power owns Kentucky Power, and then Duke Energy, of course. I'll go ahead and go to the next slide from there. So as we look at those numbers, they're not even that accurate because Kentucky doesn't require regular reporting. So as you'll see here in a couple slides, all the information that we have is up to mid-22. So we're kind of looking through a foggy window at some of this, and the numbers still look pretty bad. Go ahead and go to the next slide for me, please. In 2022, like I said, the numbers were up to May of 22. Kentucky utilities, or Kentuckians, faced 61,583 disconnections, with Kentucky Utilities being the top disconnector in the state. Go ahead, next slide, please. So this graph shows a timeline through the moratorium placed on disconnections for COVID. Everything flatlined. Everybody needed to keep their power on. And then through that time, everybody still kept on making money. AEP saw a gross profit of $2.2 billion that year with without doing disconnections. Next slide for me, please, Eric. And then PPL, who is the worst in Kentucky for disconnections for that same time frame through the moratorium, saw a $4.208 billion gross profit. So it seems pretty clear that even without disconnections, the utilities are doing just fine. So go ahead, next slide for me, please. Yeah, without those disconnections, there would be a 1% loss in their dividends. So it really just shows that we can take care of our people, and the investor-owned utilities can still get their profits. This is a no-brainer at the end of the day. And then I'll go ahead and pass it back to Julie.
All right. So once we know from all these reports, from all this data, from everything that that we ourselves are experiencing, or people in our community are experiencing, that this is something that needs to be acted on. It's not just that we have an opportunity to act on it, but we need to do something about it here in Kentucky, and lives are on the line, truly. So you can go ahead into the next slide, Eric. All right, so what can you do about it? There is a House bill, luckily, in the state legislature right now that is enacting some regulations around this that are coming from those recommendations in that Powerless in the US report, where we want to be protecting people around the temperature, around people who have medical devices that they need to be plugged in, and other protections that will prevent these utility disconnections. And that House bill is named House Bill 180. And I think we can go ahead and play that video from our friend of K4ED, Rachel Norton.
Hi, my name is Rachel Norton. I'm a board member of the Kentucky Conservation Committee and also an engineer interested in sustainability. And I've been living in Kentucky for my entire life and working in this field for almost 10 years. I am coming to you today to talk about House Bill 180, which is relating to public utilities. It's a timely thing to talk about because as I sit here on January 19th, we are headed into a weekend of temperatures with a low of 0 and 3 degrees on Saturday and Sunday, which it's Kentucky, so it'll probably change before you see this. But a little over a year ago, a similar situation happened, and around December 23rd, 2023, we had a situation in which utilities had to instate rolling blackouts. And it ended up in a situation in which we had 43,000 Kentuckians without power at one point in time. And this bill seeks to guide us through situations like that so there aren't people that are in dangerous situations without power. And there are many reasons why people might be in a dangerous situation without power, but some examples are medical reasons, very small children, or folks that are older. All of these are reasons that this becomes very quickly dangerous for people. And we need to put some guide rails around what's going to happen in these situations so that we don't leave people in dangerous situations with no notice. So in general, this bill seeks to create both the parameters under which these things can happen. So they're using the terms winter and summer temperature standards for disconnection. So for example, above a certain heat index in the summer, below a certain temperature in the winter that could become dangerous, to allow for guidance on making decisions around disconnection. And not only that, but making sure that the time period has enough of a buffer for people to get past that really hot or cold spell. So a 72-hour period in which that standard is exceeded so that they have enough time. So if it's 100 degrees, then they have to wait until the 100 degrees is that period, that temperature has lowered for 72 hours so that people can recover and get to a more stabilized place. And that they can't be surprised by disconnection on holidays or weekends, and even before 8 and after 5 on weekdays. So there are also there are all of those parameters, and then there are also the parameters around making sure that people who maybe haven't been able to pay their bills for a lot of different reasons and have had to pay, or there can be reconnection fees that you didn't have the extra money for. So if the payment history isn't such that it's been paid on time every time, people might have trouble reconnecting, even though they didn't decide to be disconnected. They were just disconnected and without what they needed, with no notice, at least in the situation in last December of 2023. So all of this takes into account all of the challenges that we ran into last year and have since in other ways that just aren't as substantial as that point in time. But there are other details that also are important to these events. And finally, it also requires the Public Service Commission to issue an order setting forth applicable rules and procedures, which is really important. It's so important to have the Public Service Commission involved in situations when it is between what the people need and what the utility structure can provide. So that's also a huge reason to support this bill. As a citizen of Kentucky and someone interested in our sustainability, I really support this bill. And as a board member of the Kentucky Conservation Committee, thank you so much.
All right. Well, although she isn't here, thank you, Rachel, for that overview of the bill. We could go on to the next slide. And as Rachel already explained, these are the basic ingredients of this bill. Everything that is a part of these safeguards or guardrails that prevent the disconnections for a certain population of Kentucky. So number one, it would prevent utilities from disconnecting service during those extreme winter temperatures and extreme summer temperatures, so that when it's truly most dangerous for folks to be disconnected, that would eliminate that risk. Number two would be to create a 30-day grace period, protecting people when they do have a medical need, when disconnection would threaten their health and safety. So that is protecting lots of people, like people we heard from during the KPC case, that really have a medical need to have their power. And then number three, for preventing people who are paying 10% of their bill or $200 to not be disconnected because they are trying to pay that back. And so a utility wouldn't be able to just disconnect people when they are trying to pay a portion of their bill. Because again, if they can't pay their energy bill, they definitely are not going to be able to pay that reconnection fee and all of those fees that come across with those disconnections. So these are as this says, basic safeguards. We know that this bill could go even above and beyond this, but even this legislation would be life-changing for a lot of folks. Next slide. And we don't want to, leave out of the conversation just these utility disconnections, because of course our high energy bills are a symptom of the larger issue that we have had in Kentucky, where we're not investing in our energy efficiency in our homes. Our utilities are not allowing us or enabling us to invest in that energy efficiency. And so there's a lot more that we could do to make sure people are able to stay comfortable in their homes, pay their energy bills, and even get assistance with their bills before disconnection even is something that people are facing. So there's a lot of different policies ways that statewide or even locally with local and county governments could support these programs that really make things easier and also reduce the energy that we're using in the first place. So the first one of those are bill assistance programs like LIHEAP. Those are ones that people call that up when they need help with their bills, and that's something that can prevent people from getting behind on their bills in the first place. Then weatherization and energy efficiency programs, those are going to be helping to conserve the energy and not make us need so much energy in the first place, because a lot of our energy does get wasted from bad insulation from our old homes that just the energy goes out the windows, literally. And so this is going to be, those programs could be created by our utilities, they could be provided by our government, and these kind of things would help us be more comfortable in our homes and prevent this from ever happening. And then the last is the pay as you save and other inclusive financing programs. And these are something that any utility in Kentucky is able to do, and they could create a program, what we call a pay as you save, where they pay for these energy efficiency improvements to a home, and then that just gets put on your energy bill, and you're able to pay that off through your energy bill as you were already seeing the energy efficiency savings. So so your energy bill would be going down from the savings, and you'd be able to pay off these improvements in a much more affordable way. So there's so many things that our utilities could do, our state lawmakers could do, our local governments can do, because any death or illness from a utility disconnection is an active policy choice. We are not choosing to do all these programs or invest in these programs and in our people. So, so again, House Bill 180 is a first step. And so, and it is a great first step, and something that is going to be transformative and something that is winnable. It has already received bipartisan support. It did last year, and this year is co-sponsored by Republicans. But of course could use more co-sponsors because it has not been assigned to a committee yet. And for those who might need a reminder for the legislative process, how it works in Kentucky is a bill does need to be assigned to a committee after it's introduced in the House before it can be discussed and people can offer their testimony about this bill or be heard by the leaders. So so we are trying to make it be heard and make our voices be heard that this is an excellent bill that has bipartisan support, is going to save lives, and is going to be something that everyone can get behind. So we just need this bill to get the attention that it deserves. So we are calling on people to make calls to their legislator, make emails to their legislators, and then talk to other folks who are interested in this awesome legislation, and make a difference that we can really call on our lawmakers to support this. And next slide is a specific item that you can do and we can take part in next week. So so we have planned a call-in day next week on February 6th, 2024, where we can all flood the legislative message lines about House Bill 180 and trying to get it that attention it deserves to be moved on to the committee. So so we are trying to all have coordinated calls so that throughout the day we can have an opportunity to each of us call in and also share on social media, share with your friends and family that they should make a call too, so that when they're getting calls all day about House Bill 180, they can know for sure that's something to pay attention to. So Chris put the link in the chat. Thank you. And we hope that you sign up. And again, you can call your legislator anytime and talk about the House Bill 180, and you can call unlimited times. But with these coordinated calls, we think it's something that's going to be helping to raise that attention that this bill needs. And then we have our Stop the Shutoffs lobby day. And so that time we are going to Frankfurt. That is in 2 weeks on February 15th at 9 a.m. And we are going to be meeting with legislators in person and sitting down and having some discussions so that they can get this information that we went over today about how critical of an issue it is in Kentucky, how many Kentuckians are experiencing shutoffs. A lot of our politicians probably just simply don't know that this is something that that is really faced by a lot of folks. And then, yeah, we'll be all gathering together and talking with legislators, and again, hopefully making some movement and getting more co-sponsors, or getting people to enough co-sponsors, enough attention to this bill that it does then get moved to committee so it can be heard and discussed and eventually passed through to the Senate and then passed into law. All right, and then next slide. Oh, I think actually, well, all right, I think this is the last one before we, I think, pop into our breakouts. Yes, so how can we take action with a local focus? So we're gonna be going into our breakouts and discussing like what questions about the bill we have, what thoughts on the bill, or is there any local action that you want to discuss or organize around? So with that, I think Eric will actually, the next slide will share where we're how we're going to break up into our breakout groups, and then this will be a short discussion there.
Can we pause quickly for, we have a question from Bryn Martin.
Real quick, I just wanted to make a correction while we were on the recording, because I made the mistake on the recording, but it's in the chat. I said millions died from it. It's not millions, it's thousands. Since 1979, there's been about 19,000. I think it's estimated like 2.5 deaths per million across the country. So just wanted to make sure that was on the tape. Thank you.
Thank you, Bren. And with that, I think that we will, Eric can stop sharing the screen and whisk us into, we can self-select our breakout rooms, where one is Western Kentucky, breakout number 2 is Eastern Kentucky, and number 3 is Louisville and Lexington. And if you have another utility provider that that was not on that list, then you can you can join a breakout group number 4, or sit in join another group that would fit your area.
I think Bren has her hand up again, Julie.
Bren, is
Bren?
your hand still up
Come
from
on.
before? Maybe. I think it is.
Okay, sorry.
No worries.
All right, are folks seeing the breakout rooms pop up? I just saw mine.
Yes, I see it, but I don't see the room pop up.
So you
Scroll
are
down.
Hold on
You
here.
should be able to see the rooms if you scroll down in the
Yep.
chat.
and you should be
Okay.
able to select which room fits your description the best, whether you are
I
in
see it.
Western, Eastern, or
I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. If folks have any trouble with self-assigning a room, please let me know and I will assign you.
All right, actually, Chris, if you could share, you got cut off in our breakout room, but what you were saying was another point that's real important, I think, for everyone to hear too.
Thanks. I was just making a note that Corey has been working really hard with Kentucky Power, and in the context of the last rate case, they agreed to most of the provisions that you'll find in this bill voluntarily. And so if you run into a lawmaker who says, this is just too much, utilities can't do this, and they just don't believe you, you can direct them directly to the settlement agreement that's on the PSC's website. And we could find that and include that in the materials that we send out. So again, some of the utilities are already saying this is fine. And so that's a great talking point for difficult lawmakers.
And Chris, I'll just add too that lawmakers sometimes are a little bit challenged when it comes to issues around utilities. They're a little shy about chiming in on utilities because it can be pretty political. When you speak up, it really gives them more ammunition for them to step up more. They want to know that they're being backed by constituents.
Receipts always help.
Yeah, absolutely, Kenny. We've got receipts for the fact that, you know, they won't lose money. We've got receipts for the fact that some of them are already doing it. And we've got plenty of receipts for other states who already have these protections in place. And so Kentucky really just needs to get on this common sense. I've heard folks call it a common sense legislation, and I really think that that's the perfect word. It doesn't, especially with the fact that, you know, it's putting in protections for everyone. All of us can support this bill.
And, you know, Corey, I'll just say with that, you know, I live in a small town, Benham, Kentucky, and as Chris knows, he was part of developing the program. We have a pay-as-you-save program here, and our utility is owned by the citizens that live here in the community. And there's currently like 405 meters that they serve through the utility. But we've not had a rate increase here in this city in 10 years. And a lot of it is due to energy efficiency and the pay as you save program. And the utility is still making enough money, not just to provide the utilities, but to run the entire city and have maintenance employees and a mayor, and everything else they pay is paid through our power board utility. So that's a great example.
I agree.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So as we wrap up, I know it's a few minutes after the hour, but and I really appreciate what Cameron put in the chat. As of January 1st, 2023, 41 states have protections during cold weather events. And our state is one of those that has very bare minimum protections just for some people and just for some time of year. 20 states have protections for hot weather, and we're not one of those. And there are states with all kinds of other great protections, like protections for households with small children, protections for any minor children. So we are going to keep fighting for this baseline protection, and we're going to keep fighting to make it even better because we deserve better. And no one deserves to get disconnected from the power, whether it's hot or cold, whether it's an extreme weather event or just a normal day. We all deserve to be in safe and comfortable homes. And so we hope that you'll join us at these events over the next several weeks to keep the legislators' eyes on HB 180. We're going to be calling next week. The week after that, we'll be in Frankfurt. And then hopefully as the bill moves, we'll continue to do more call-in days and keep emailing, messaging, calling our legislators about it. Because these are things that Kentucky families are thinking about every single day. Like I said, every single day, folks are looking at their thermostat, putting out all their bills, figuring out how they can keep it cold enough in the house, basically, to keep the lights on. And legislators should be thinking about that every day too. And they should be thinking about that every day when they go to the Capitol, that there is a piece of common sense legislation that they could pass to save lives right now this year. So thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
And I'm